It's the Dev Friday Show with Mark and Tim.
Was it too loud there, Mark?
Well, it definitely woke me up.
Well, I guess that's good. We need, after our count-in video, I feel like we need just a little bit something else that's like I don't know, it plays during that Dev Friday section where the voiceover guy is saying it's the Dev Friday show. It just cuts right to us. We need
now
like
the real point of this Dev Friday is to wake me up in the mornings. We do it so early in the morning.
So yeah, like maybe an animation of an alarm clock and you trying to get out of bed or something like that. And then we cut here because it just does the countdown and you get like 0 and then it's just us. Yeah. And it feels like we should have something playing behind our masterful bumper music or whatever it is. Anyway, exciting news. Mark's typing. And anything exciting happened this week?
I've been crazy busy with work.
I was gonna say, like,
it's been a little bit of a crazy. I'm gonna say a storm. It's not a storm. It's not chaotic, but it's just a lot happening at my company. Because as the topic that we've been discussing for the past couple of weeks is that. Our AWS consultants are what's considered rolling off. They are transitioning to other opportunities within AWS or with other clients. And so now just me and a couple other developers, we're just riding solo. And it's definitely been an interesting transition. But it's been good, just like super busy.
So you had a whole lot more consultants than you have people now, right? Like, were they full-time or?
Yeah. So when they're working with us, they were pretty much full-time as we were their only client. And now, depending upon what the consultant is, like if it's more of a business architect consultant, sometimes they may be working on with other clients or other projects. But when you brought in developers or even testers to work with us on a daily basis, we're their only client, and they were just full-time 40 hours a week with us. And so now that is one by one falling off.
So is that because obviously you're not replacing them with the same amount of consultants, right? Or not the same amount of consultants with the same amount of actual employees, right? So
nope.
So is that a I get the feeling that there's a lot more work.
Yeah.
But is it also like a byproduct of, we built a lot, and because I know like a consulting arrangement, it depends. It varies from arrangement to arrangement, but sometimes they're with the idea that yes, this will wind down. And like we're going to build the thing, and then it's going to kind of go into maintenance mode, or we need to front load the initial build of this system, architecture, platform, product, SaaS, whatever it is, and then when that's done, less people can maintain it. So is that that's the idea, Tim? That's the idea.
That's the dream.
All right. So I think
I would say about let's say 90% of the platform is complete. It definitely has some rough edges, and it's something that as a team we're talking about over the next 6 months to a year, how we're going to definitely keep major parts of it, but then which are parts that we should refactor, simplify, maybe even just to re-architect in some ways to fit the business going forward. But it definitely majority of the code base, I would say, is complete, especially for the customers that we have on the platform now. We only have about, let's say, 3 large customers. I talked about this before. I work with the universities.
Right.
3 universities, but our plan is to get up to 16 at least over the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
So but we don't expect to bring on another one, let's say, till maybe towards the end of the following year. So we have some time to to reassess and to kind of regroup and to definitely clean up some of the rough edges, which I think that's the primary responsibility of me and a couple of the other developers, architects, as we kind of maintain and work on the platform. But there are some reason why I've been so busy this week. There are a few features that we have to release for our customers that were not completed by the AWS consultants. So that is so what we're doing. We're slowly starting as part of the transition, which actually I think is actually working well. Is that some of the new build out of these features we're just managing internally. We may bring one or two consultants in just for additional support in regards to if we just need some extra hands on a keyboard to pump out some code for a specific part of the components that we're working on. But the architecture, the design, the implementation has pretty much been handled internally. And
because you're in part, you're in part transitioning from the consultants to actual employees because of a lot of the I don't want to say security concerns, but it's like that, right? It's the PII.
That's a major part of it. Yeah.
The thing that it's cumbersome to have consultants work on it because they have to work on they can't actually get access to the production environment, things like that.
Well, that's an interesting point when it comes to PII, personal information, and who, especially outside parties who can access that. It all depends on the contract that's in place between our organization and the consulting agency, and also their security policies and, how compliant they are. That a lot goes into that. It's interesting we talked about this before, but AWS has a very strict policy about not seeing any production data, because they don't even want to get anywhere near PII. They don't want to have any responsibility towards that. So when you're dealing with a developed environment that has different environments for, let's say, your dev, QA, stage, then your production, and then certain levels of data will be in each of those platforms. AWS may not be able to touch, definitely not your production, maybe not your stage or QA if that has PII or production like data in it. So that can definitely create some roadblocks and some issues. I think that's also a little bit of a struggling point, because once we started to bring on more internal development resources, and the company started to realize, we can actually have our developers actually help us out with production issues, and with testing and kind of working through some customer kind of support tickets that come in. It definitely opened up the doors for a lot of requests and a lot of opportunities to it was good because it actually helped us. It was interesting too, thinking about, do you enjoy working on like support tickets or customer support requests? Is that something, I know maybe you don't do that as much in your job?
I'll answer that in an interesting way
Currently now, but maybe is that something that you look fondly back?
No, I still handle. So the way that we have the what do I want to say? Like, it's not like we can't share it, but just like how much details are useful. Like, there's some escalation processes where something can come through support and then can get in front of developers' eyes, right? And we have a rotating schedule who kind of watches that, and I'm on it because my perspective is I'm not gonna have other people do something that I'm not doing. I have to understand what they're doing if I'm gonna help manage those processes and things like that. So I'm on that. I will to answer your question, I will say that I like a whole lot more being able to debug a customer related issue in production, log into their account, look at the database that they're in, and run code that's against exactly what they're using, than a description handed me that then I have to try to replicate. Now, do I, like, sometimes something goes wrong? Like, the first thing you do is see if I can do it in my local dev environment. If I can, then great. Like, it's piece of cake to troubleshoot because I've got the code right in front of me. I can edit the code live. I can step debug. But if it's anything else, it's like, this is some weird problem. We can't figure it out. So what, I have to get my data in exactly the data that you are expressing that the customer has it in. And we don't even know if that's the problem. We just know that is the context. So I have to that would be so frustrating. So to imagine what it must have been like to describe customer issues to a bunch of consultants that are not able to see the customer data, but have to infer it and fake it, and then try to create a similar, but probably not exactly the same issue. That had to be super frustrating. So it makes sense why you would move from a consultant team to a hired.
It does, yeah.
A small, maybe even like you say, it's a smaller hired team, but it seems like, is the relationship with the consultant still there that you can ramp up as needed? Because you mentioned that, like, as you build out, maybe you'll bring on consultants. So is it?
There are it's interesting. Maybe with AWS, our relationship's still going to be where we have a like an on-call architect that we could call in, maybe meet with once
And when you say AWS, I'm curious because I kind of realized this recently. Are you working directly with AWS, or is it like, because my understanding is a lot of time the relationship is you work with a consulting firm that resells you AWS, and basically they don't charge you anything for that because they make it in the cut of the resell.
So a majority of the consulting work has been directly with AWS's professional services, which is their consulting wing.
Yeah.
But they have worked with other agencies for specific tests, like for testing, for UA testing, QA testing. We brought in like other consulting companies that's really specialized in that, and to kind of formulate some best practices and also to assist us with actually testing out deployments, everything like that. So for specific jobs or parts of the platform, we may bring in other support, but from a majority of the build out has been working directly with AWS. So it's definitely been an interesting experience. And in the architects, the developers have worked with, man, they're super smart, super friendly, great to work with, as they roll off to keeping the connections, who knows? You never know about the future, Tim. It's always good to have a network. Because you never know what's going to happen.
Always looking for that next thing. Yeah. All right.
And it's interesting seeing where they land, within AWS. Because actually one of it's interesting that he's not working for professional services anymore. He's actually transitioned to working for Amazon Prime.
Oh, like
and not building out. And interesting, his role is going to be, it's not building out the actual Prime, delivery orchestration, platform that Amazon has for their distribution, their fulfillment, right? He's not working on that part, but he's actually working with business customers that want to integrate with the Prime service. So if they have like an e-commerce platform, like very large customers that have a very large e-commerce platform and they want to integrate with Amazon's fulfillment, specifically to be Prime, because I don't know if you know anything about, the requirements to be like a Prime retailer or supplier on the Amazon platform. There are specific, turnaround times you have to meet.
Yeah, you have to
it's very, very strict.
You can get stock in a certain amount of, because is it still stocked to Prime? I like that part of the logistics. I don't know. Like when you ship Prime, you're refilling Amazon's warehouses on demand, and then
or you can ship it directly from your warehouse as long as you guarantee that you can deliver both for your responses for like order confirmations and final delivery. As long as you meet certain windows, then you can be. And so for very large companies, very large retailers that have their own distribution, fulfillment warehouses,
they already have that.
But they want to kind of have the Prime label and to grab, because that is a pretty substantial thing when you go to, I don't know if you're like me, Tim. Yeah. You go onto Amazon, if you pay for Amazon, I'm paying my $120 or $130 or $140, how much it costs per year. I'm definitely looking for that Prime service because I'm paying for that.
Yeah. I want 2-day shipping. I want them to tell me it's going to be here tomorrow, then be slightly disappointed when it's not. Yeah. So he's working for which part of
the amount of details he could give me was that he's working for the Prime group, but their Prime business group. So when a large organization wants to integrate with, I think, Amazon's fulfillment or Amazon Prime services, or within their system, he then helps them do the integration. And he's rolling into more of an architectural solution-based role and less of a hands-on development role. That he was doing a mix with us. He was definitely architecting the platform that we have, but also doing a lot of the coding and the implementation of it.
Gotcha. Yeah. So lots of fun stuff going on.
Interesting times. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, Tim, have you been why is
wait
the PHP world? Why does there always have to be a controversy?
I can't.
Why does there have to be people
It's so much better than it used to be. But I just want to make sure
infighting, lawsuits flying back and forth.
Wait a second. I have no idea what you're talking about, so we'll have to come back to that. But we glossed. We're at episode 85. So we have been doing this
last week. Wow, did we? Wow.
We were 84 last week.
Oh, wow.
So this is 85.
Time flies, Tim.
I'm pretty sure that's how numbers work. But when we started this podcast, you were like, "Yeah, I'm a teacher, but you got to keep that network open. you know, maybe one day I'll be looking for another job. And so you just said keep in touch with all these AWS consultants. I mean, are you signaling something here, Mark? Is this something that your coworkers are watching?
No, I'm not saying no, not at all. I plan to be. No, I'm happy with my current role and look to stay here for a long time.
Wow, that was such a political answer. He was like, I don't know.
It is interesting too.
When you asked that question, reporter.
When I was working on that transition and looking at opportunities, and I was talking to a couple of AWS recruiters and seeing that, and it was like it would definitely be an interesting opportunity. I think if you
would you want to?
When I was transitioning out of academia, that was kind of high on my list because I was focusing just on AWS. I was getting certified. That was my only platform that I was building on top of for my personal projects and also some small client projects. So I was only focusing on that. I was like, it would actually be kind of cool to work with AWS for, let's say, 2 to 3 years and kind of really just, really focus on just on that. But then seeing how they, what they pay, and also especially from like kind of when you first start with AWS, especially if you're not an existing employee, the levels that they have, stock options can be good, but then you have to be vested 3 to 5 years. And then I've heard horror stories where they try to push you out after 2 to 3 years because they don't want to vest you fully. And so it's like, I don't know. I'm not sure if I would or not. So
I know some people that worked there for like a year or so, or because they wanted to work for what is that FANG? I forget. What is it? Facebook, Apple,
Amazon, Netflix, and Google, right?
Yeah, and Apple's in there too. You got.
Who cares about Apple?
Oh, really? Oh, what's this? Who cares about Apple? You're still rocking all the Apple devices, aren't they?
I'm streaming on a MacBook Pro.
I was going to say,
supplied by my company. Yeah.
Who cares about Apple anyway? So I just want to make sure before we get to the PHP controversy, this wasn't some subtle announcement that you're looking for a new gig, and this was the way you were telling. This was the way you're telling everybody.
It is like, I just went through that job search process not too long ago, and so just remembering how like having a network or if you don't have, or if you have, like, say, an old network, going back to that can definitely take a lot of work. Reestablishing relationships, getting updated on the people that you used to be connected with professionally, and then kind of having them understand what you've been working on, what you're looking to do. That's a lot of work with that. But if you can kind of keep a little bit active within, let's say, on LinkedIn or within if you have some communities that you're involved in, and then kind of keep a little bit of a connection while you are working, I think it definitely makes that easier, because who knows? You never know the future, Tim. You never know. Next week, who knows? If your company that you're working for goes out of business or starts to do cutbacks and layoffs, then you could be definitely having to hit the job market pretty fast without knowing it.
I think the advice that I've always given is always be thinking what the next step is, whether you're going to take it or not. Just be like, what is the next step? And that can be actually at the place that you're working too.
True.
Like, what is the next step? Because if you're just like, I'm happy with this and I don't see myself moving. Okay, but is the company going to move around you? Are you anticipating what's going on? Are you ready for whatever opportunity may open? Is it time to say, I see that our focus is shifting, so my focus needs to shift. So always be in your mind saying, from a career standpoint, like what's the next step now? This is where I'm at. This is the position, the responsibilities, whatever that I have now. How do I use these in a way that opens up the next door?
It's true.
So always, and always, and keeping in touch with people and having a network, never a bad idea. So what's going on in the PHP world that I am unaware of? Because I just write software, Mark, and use the language. What's going on?
I thought like the PHP world was basically, if you're doing PHP, you're doing WordPress.
Come on. Okay. Is WordPress doing somebody? Am I missing something here? What's going on?
So I just heard about this. Yesterday when I was on my at the end of the day, when I'm kind of seeing my YouTube subscriptions and I'm kind of just catching up with things. So that's where I get my news from, is YouTube now. So I saw that there was this back and forth.
Wait. YouTube, but like exclusively shorts? Like,
especially shorts. Why do they pop up on the feed? Like either my TV or my browser. I understand shorts from a mobile perspective. When I'm on YouTube app, that totally makes sense. I can understand
it's full screen.
I don't use YouTube much for my phone, but I primarily use it for my TV. Yeah. So why am I seeing these shorts that are these vertical?
You just want to grab your TV and be like,
what's the point of this? I'm like, it's so annoying. Yeah, I hate those. I wish I could turn them off. I will look for features I could turn them off, and I cannot turn them off anywhere. So
you're getting your news
on
from
my YouTube feed and my subscription feed, right? And just kind of, there's a couple YouTube channels I follow, especially when it comes to like tech news.
Okay.
And one streamer, one guy was talking about the controversy that happened, I guess this week or last week, between WordPress, Matt Mullenweg, the founder and benevolent dictator of the WordPress project, but also CEO, owner of Automatic.
Is he okay? I am so out of touch with. I don't even know how they're structured, but
unfortunately, I know a lot about this because I used to do WordPress work, so it's like I could definitely talk a little bit about this.
Okay.
Then they've had some back and forth with WP Engine. Do you remember hearing about WP Engine? I know you're probably sure.
Kind of know what WP Engine is. I thought that they were a host.
Yeah, so
they plugin author too.
I think they might be the most. I don't know if they're probably not the most popular WordPress host because pretty much GoDaddy or HostGator.
I mean, anybody
host
can,
anybody hosts WordPress, right?
WordPress,
PHP, Tim, you put it anywhere, right?
Yeah, exactly. But you mean like managed? Let's categorize like managed WordPress host. And are they bigger than WordPress.com? Because WordPress.com is
this is where I'm going, and this is it'd be interesting if you compare the numbers, which I don't know how much WordPress. Well, WordPress, because WordPress.com, that is owned by Automatic. That's the business organization.
Yes.
I don't know if they release their numbers because I don't think they're publicly traded. I don't know. They aren't. I think they're still private. So I don't know if they fully release their numbers regards to how many subscribers, how much money, how much revenue they drive through WordPress.com. And we could talk about that. WordPress.org versus WordPress.com.
Right.
But WP Engine is a managed WordPress hosting service. I think it is probably the best in a sense. If you're a company, your business, and you want to pay somebody basically to host your WordPress site for you, and also you have a lot of traffic or a lot of demands. Also, if you're, like I said, if you're hosting pretty much a large site, then WP Engine is probably the best way to go because I think they do provide a lot of services. They've been around for a pretty long time. They're not cheap. If you take a look, go to wpengine.com. Then look at their pricing for their hosting plans. You compare that to, let's say, a shared host or just a more general host like a GoDaddy. They definitely are not cheap. They're probably one of the more premium hosts, but that they offer that price because they provide a lot of services around that.
Right.
So there's some controversy, and like I said, I don't know everything about this, but it was just super entertaining to kind of hear a little bit about this. How like there's just going back. There's lawsuits flying back and forth between Automatic. Or actually, no, I'm sorry. Actually, it's the WordPress community organization because actually it's like a non-profit. It's like an open source nonprofit, trademark issue that they're claiming here. They're saying there's confusion in the marketplace. So when people, think of or they see WP Engine, they think, that's the WordPress company. That's the company that basically, if I want to have a WordPress site, I would go to.
The argument is that the trademark infringement is so strong that there's Okay.
So the company is named WP Engine, and if you're not kind of within the WordPress ecosystem, that the initials WP, you can kind of
WordPress,
derive that comes from WordPress. But also think about from like the plugins, the themes, even the architecture within WordPress site. If you open up the code base of WordPress, almost everything is WP dash. Right, and how the files are named and everything. So WP, those two letters are synonymous with WordPress, especially if you're a developer and building on top of that, platform. Even though WP Engine doesn't have the WordPress name, now they definitely use WordPress in their marketing materials on their website throughout it.
I went to their site because we're talking about it. I was expecting a little bit more. I don't know, trademark infringement.
Well, they may have been, who knows? Like I said, I have been fully following this and watching the WP Engine website. They may have been pulling back a lot of the references for WordPress throughout their site over the past couple of weeks because of this whole big issue, because now it's become a legal issue. But it's interesting how like this back and forth between, you have, and in the sense that it is the WordPress.org or the open source community organization, nonprofit organization that manages the WordPress open source project. They're the ones I believe that is making. I know it's Automatic too. It's both. That's why it's also confusing too. When you have an open source community project that's as large as WordPress, and it's primarily maintained by a corporate entity, which is Automatic. But then there's a sort of like it's kind of these two groups. They're so tightly coupled together. You can't really separate. You can't have one of the without the other in a sense. So I guess you could have WordPress.org without Automatic. Let's say if Automatic just went away and then it was
Mhm,
truly an open
mhm.
source project,
Mhm.
like an npm or a node that wasn't owned by an organization, and it was just maintained as an open source project with developers from around the world. But so they're both are these two groups are going after WP Engine for trademark infringements because they don't want people to see when they think of WP Engine, they think, oh, that's the WordPress company. That's that's the only platform, the core platform I should be using to host my WordPress websites on.
Mhm.
But it is interesting too, and this is something when I was watching some interviews with Matt Mullenweg, which he's the
Mhm.
founder and
Yeah.
CEO of Automatic, and the primary.
Never been a controversial figure in his
Yeah.
entire life, but
Well,
yes,
he's
go
an
on.
interesting guy. Where if you see him in interviews, he seems like the most mild mannered guy.
Mhm.
He talks very slowly, very calmly. And if you watch him in some of these interviews too, because of this thing, he looks super stressed, super tired now. But then I'm thinking, is there another side to him? I'm like, is there like, man, if you cross him, does he just go for the throat? Right? It's like in
Sushi
public,
for trademark infringement.
in public, he's the most mild mannered guy. But then once you cross him,
Yeah.
man, he's gonna hire hitmen and he's just gonna go
He's-
after you, right?
Most people don't know he's actually Batman, but go on. Yeah.
So he so it's interesting. So watching interviews with him, it kind of him, he's always doing a lot of PR now, trying to manage this because
Yeah.
WP Engine put out press releases, and because also what Matt, he didn't deal with this the right way from a communication perspective. This really came out in a very public way because he pushed out in a public way through one of his WordCamps, which WordCamps is the big conferences they hold throughout the year, different locations around the world.
Yeah.
And so he pretty much made the last WordCamp he did, pretty much made his keynote about WP Engine, just railing against WP Engine, how they are like a cancer on the community,
Oh no,
how they should not be kind of in regards, they should not be aligned with they're not aligned properly from a community standpoint, and how they support the community. Like they only provide a certain number of developer hours to contribute back to the project, and it's very small compared to everyone else who contributes back to the project. They don't support the community in regards to financially, even though they do a lot of sponsorships and a lot of at community events. So he's pretty much spent his keynote at a WordCamp just railing against WP Engine, and then it just blew the doors open, and then lawsuits just went back and forth after he made this public disclaimer that WP Engine is a cancer on the WordPress community. So it's definitely been interesting, and it always seems like with why like with PHP, it always feels like there's every couple of years there's something that has to happen with the PHP community that there's a lot of controversy around it.
I mean, I guess you're right. Yeah.
Or maybe it's just open source, especially when you mix open source.
That's the
with
thing,
business,
though.
That's definitely
that's what I like. If you say some other languages, you're like, oh, they have the Java community, which is run by a company, or which is run by which the entire language ecosystem is. So I think it is something that has to do with the fact that both the language and many of the projects that are well known and built on it are open source, and open source gets interesting.
But from a trademark or license perspective, more than often they can be owned by companies, and then the companies can have the choice of whether or not they're going to enforce that trademark. Do you know that JavaScript is owned by Oracle?
The name of it?
Yeah, the name of it.
Yeah, I think I did.
So they're pretty good about if you create like a company or even like a YouTube channel or something, or just some type of organization that has the full JavaScript in the name of it, they will send you a cease and desist and to say you have to stop using JavaScript for your company name. Like if it's part of your company name. So if you have like lead or whatever, lead JavaScript training or something like that, you put that as part of your name. Nope, can't have that.
Nope.
Yeah.
So today on the Developer Friday JavaScript show,
I do like. I don't mind having an issue with JavaScript. I don't have an issue with PHP either.
No. I mean, we should change our name and see how long it takes.
Oh, you might get some press. We could definitely talk about how we're getting a cease and desist from Oracle.
Yeah,
because that's one company I probably will never work for in my life, so I don't really care.
not on your list.
Oh, no, I don't. Yeah,
I think it's probably has to do with the fact that there's so much.
I'd work for Salesforce more than Oracle.
Really?
Oh yeah.
So I think those are two big, large orgs, though. Like when I think
Well,
of
it's
the
not just the
size,
size. Yeah, it's not the size of the organ. It's basically kind of, I don't know. Maybe it's the
you think of
maybe
the
having
culture, the
experience
temperament.
with the
Yeah.
platforms. Like so,
Okay.
maybe my limited experience of working with the Oracle database and kind of being around. Also, how they treat Java too.
I mean,
So I
Oracle's
actually I did more.
they own.
I definitely touched Oracle in a couple of companies I worked with, but it was but I was never like a DB administrator or did a lot of heavy database work with it. Just
But
touch
I
it
mean,
from a developer kind of endpoint perspective of kind of integrating with it. But from a Java perspective, oh yeah, I definitely have a huge amount of experience with Java. And when they kind of took over Java,
mhm,
from as a project standpoint,
mhm.
and also from MySQL too. Maybe
Yeah,
that's my
exactly.
see, that's my thing. It's like Oracle has a habit of sucking up open source projects. They still maintain them. They still stay open source, but then it just something about it just changes, and it just becomes more how they manage it. Also, from a documentation standpoint, from a support standpoint, also how they start to kind of walk that line. Like, okay, let's have this part of the project be the truly community nonprofit open source, but then we want to roll it into this commercial
Yeah.
project. Then we can start
Okay.
making money out of it. Then we can start licensing it. We
I
can
mean,
start to we can provide our support for it and
that's what they're gonna
charge for that,
do. Yeah. Yeah.
which that's what they do for MySQL. Yeah, whatever. So like, don't get me on the rails talking about Oracle. Yeah, it's mostly because of MySQL and Java that have a kind of a distaste for that organization.
I would.
But I actually work for Salesforce now in my company, and actually I'm liking Salesforce. I don't mind it as much.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
Salesforce is. I don't know what
yeah.
the size of the company is Salesforce versus Oracle, but I just know that when I'd have to travel to San Francisco, Java One or Oracle One, their conference was huge, but
Mhm.
so was Dreamforce.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Dreamforce was ridiculous.
Which is interesting. I've never thought about, doing a lot of Salesforce work.
Yeah.
But it's actually kind of interesting because I've actually been interfacing with their API because of a feature that we're building out. Because we use a lot of Salesforce for our front end, for our customer facing front end kind of forms or applications that
So
usually
you're
kind of
doing an
goes through.
integration where you are the Salesforce user and you're leveraging Salesforce as a pipeline for leads and things like
Correct.
that.
Mostly purely from a front end perspective.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, so
Um,
instead of hosting our own applications, we primarily use Salesforce, like for
mhm.
our own kind of GUI, web front ends, primarily use Salesforce applications as that. But it's actually been interesting is because you could do a lot of configuration with it. And I don't manage that side of it, even though I have a lot of background when it comes to UI and front end work. I just manage actually the integration now. So it's interesting. And from an integration standpoint, their data models, it makes sense. Like when I look at the documentation, look at their APIs, I look at the relationships between the objects, how they name things and how it's documented. It's been a pretty good experience. So yeah.
But that's, yeah, yeah. I was just checking. Like, it's not a. What do I want to say? It's not a. Your customers are using Salesforce because that's a different type of integration.
No, that's correct. And yeah,
Yeah.
because pretty much Salesforce is just like the endpoint for certain parts of our platform. Not the
Gotcha.
whole platform, just certain parts of it that we need more customer facing interactions, primarily with forms.
Yeah.
If
No.
we need to
Understood.
collect
Yeah.
data, collect submissions for certain
Because
parts
then
of
it
the
ties back
platform.
to Salesforce record that's a contact, right? And then you
Yep.
have all the data
Yep.
all together. Yeah. Yeah. That's understandable. Um, but no, I think the controversy stuff does come from the nature of open source and kind of like the weird because you don't. It's the relationship that you're describing, right? Like it's open source. You've said anybody can use it, but then when people start using it, you're like picky about how they can use it. And I'm not saying it's wrong to be picky about how they can use it. It's like, are you making it? Are people thinking? And I would say, I don't know. I find that the description of that lawsuit fascinating because I don't think at any point in time WP Engine intended to make people think they were the people behind WordPress. I don't think they like that. Now, did people start thinking that? Maybe. Perhaps it's because you founded WordPress and then created a commercial organization called Automatic.
Correct. It's not when
Like,
you look at the name
it's not
automatic.
their fault
There's
that
no
you didn't even
affiliation.
try
Yep,
to
I thought the
associate the
same
two
thing.
concepts
Yep.
together. I mean, what do they
And
what do
then
they think
they
Automatic does?
and then they have WordPress.com. Well, one of the things also Matt was talking about in his interviews was also how they represent WordPress within their own platform, so that they will turn off specific features of WordPress and basically make WordPress. But it's an open source project. They could do it if they host WordPress on their own servers. They could pretty much do whatever they want to do it with, right? It's open source. But they turn off certain features of it, like the revision history, like they'll limit that because they don't want to have like so if you make a page edit and you want to keep track of that data in a database level or file level, they don't want to maintain a huge history, so they'll restrict the number of revisions. That's one argument that Matt made, saying, oh, they're limiting our creators. Their content is sacred and it should be maintained, and our users should be able to go back in time and be able to see changes, however far they want to go back to, right? But WP Engine limits that. They only limit it for 2 or 3 edits, and because they only want to make money, they only want to charge you. But it's interesting though, if you actually, and I do have a little bit of experience with WordPress.com with some previous client work. If you go to WordPress, also with my students, it's something I always showed my students too, and kind of walk them through. So if they wanted to get started with a WordPress website, okay, WordPress.com might be the easiest way to do it. But if you go to WordPress.com, you will see that they start locking down features pretty fast for specific plans. So if you subscribe to their free trial, their 2-week or month, or just if they still may have like a free account, you will see it is heavily restricted. You cannot install many themes or themes you may want to have, or definitely plugins. They highly restrict the plugin system to plugins you can install. You definitely cannot change the code base. The editing capabilities of like the code, either CSS or the code editing capabilities you have within the editor, they limited that until you start paying more. Then they start opening up more features. So in a sense, WordPress.com is doing something similar that WP Engine does as a platform. But the difference is that Automatic owns WordPress.com.
Yeah,
So,
it's honestly like if you want no restrictions and to be able to use WordPress as it was intended or whatever, go install WordPress on your own server.
yeah.
Like that's it. Like if you're creating managed hosting, there's zero problem with putting restrictions around it that you think either benefit your customer or benefit you.
Or AWS. I have an open source project that shows I can host WordPress on serverless on AWS. It's not the cheapest way to do it, but it's definitely a scalable way to do it.
Scroll back a little bit, as I hopefully upload all these episodes today, because I've got them all queued up. So we should have a Dev Friday dump here.
So it always seems like every couple of years there's some drama, and I mentioned PHP because it always seems like it's just funny. It's good especially when PHP groups start to bicker and fight with each other. But this is interesting too, because WordPress is so synonymous with the web and with websites and with PHP, because if you think about what the crazy number of PHP is, that it powers, I don't know, close to 70% of the websites on the internet. But then that's primarily because WordPress is 40% of the websites on the internet.
Yeah, it's PHP powers more than 70%
or something like that. Yeah,
but yeah, you're right. A huge number of that is WordPress. So yeah, and
he can't get away from it. Even though Matt Mullenweg, if you also look back at his interviews he's done way back in the past, he was not a big PHP fan himself. Even though he forked WordPress from, I can't remember the name of it was Site Home or something. It was some weird open source project. And you just Google, you'll be able to find it up. It's but he forked it and then made it into WordPress.com. Immediately had other people support it. So from a developer, he's the type of open source guy that I think can definitely hack stuff together, at least in his past. But he would even admit himself, he's not a hardcore developer in a sense. He brought in other support developers who kind of supported the platform and built out the community around that. And also in the past too, he actually railed against PHP, even though his primary platform that he supported was built on PHP. So I don't know, maybe he thinks highly of PHP now that's after 5.4, and maybe he feels better about it now. So I don't know.
I do not know his opinions of it either, other than apparently they haven't switched the language it's written on. So there's that.
Even though they're trying to cut out PHP, well, at least from the admin part of it, which it's interesting too. I go back to WordPress every now and then. Like I said, I did a couple projects with it last summer, and like I talked about, it was interesting experiment hosting a personal website on AWS and seeing how far I could push it from a serverless perspective, and to do that. But every time I go back to WordPress, I get into saying, oh, they've done actually some interesting features in the admin, and they changed around. They're trying to do more with building in native JavaScript controls, so make it more asynchronous and make it more kind of more interactive. I can kind of see it, but also each time I go back, it also feels more clunky and more. And then if I go into the code base, which don't go in the code base, and then you really look at, and they're trying to improve it at how they when they do the updates, I think you can see they're trying to refactor it and trying to improve the code base from a PHP perspective. But you'll see a lot of old PHP practices just because of how the legacy of the state that PHP was at back in the day when WordPress started to where it is now. It's definitely the code looks a little bit old when you go into it.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's just like any other PHP project, right, Tim?
I don't know if I'd say any other PHP project. There's some. If you start writing something today, you'll have far different code than you would.
Yeah, I agree with that.
With something
Definitely
that's been around for years.
Yeah.
That is for sure. Or I mean, but that's the beauty of PHP. You wouldn't have to. You can still write it that way, but there's a whole lot better ways.
Let's switch from PHP to Python. So one thing, and I can't go into detail about this.
All right.
But one thing also I realized this week, because I've had a pretty good experience with Python in my days, done a lot of Python work and coming back to pretty much a TypeScript and Python shop. So I don't know if percentage wise how it breaks down, but we have a lot of Python code. And so I was working through a set of components on the platform, and it was pretty much all Python. And then I realized something where like Python, because I also taught Python in school, right? I taught it in my programming classes, object-oriented classes, taught it with Python too. And I realized that Python is actually, it's easy to read. It can be. It's definitely easy to write, or easy to learn. Let's put it. Python definitely is, one of the calling cards or hallmarks of the language. In fact, it is very easy to learn, right? So if you want to teach somebody programming, Python is probably a great language to use as a tool to help somebody to learn how to program. Because in a sense, if you start with very simple Python, it's very easy to learn. But since Python is object-oriented, which is funny that I used to teach an object-oriented class in Python, and if you deal with a very large code base that's modularized, it's heavily uses components and heavily uses libraries and it's object-oriented, trying to follow the code is crazy difficult, much more difficult than, especially if I'm working with a TypeScript project. So if I'm reading the code and trying to step through it, maybe because of how expressive Python is, it basically will allow you to do anything, and how it can kind of reach back and forth between different libraries. And as you're passing data back and forth, also because it is a dynamic language, how it is passing data back and forth. I was in this part of this code base. I was like, wow, this is actually really hard. I did finally wrap my head around it, but it took me a long time to really kind of see where all the connections were made between all these different files. And then I was like, does it need to be this complicated? I'm like, I'm wondering, how did it get to this question? Did it get to this point because they're trying to make it as modular as possible? But then also, was that part of the reason why? Because Python enables that.
Right.
And I was like, it did make me think about Python as a language, and think about if you're trying, especially dynamic languages, and try to make it as flexible as possible, as malleable as possible, to give users control to kind of how they're going to architect their applications. It definitely can make it. You could definitely get into the weeds pretty quickly with it. Which honestly, it's not just a Python problem. I've seen this with other languages too. But it reminded me of that effect of like, it could definitely go object-oriented programming. Can definitely go off the rails pretty quickly in dynamic languages. And it was a reminder of that. I guess in statically typed languages, it feels like it's a little bit more controlled, a little more constrained. At least I can follow better, maybe with an IDE, so it's kind of a little bit easier. But it just feels, I don't know, it just was definitely felt really complicated this week. I was kind of working through something.
It's always, I don't know. It's and there's always that when you get dropped into a different domain.
Yeah.
And you don't understand the domain. And then it's like, once you slowly become aware of the domain, then things start to make sense. But without it, you're like, this is just, I don't understand this. Because we're trying to express a lot of very interesting and complex ideas through words, right? Like and not just through like words, but through words that a computer can understand. And then that's the other thing that we don't think of a lot when we write. Well, I shouldn't say we don't think. We should probably think of it more often than we do. I know some developers do. But you're not just writing code for the machine. You're writing code for a future developer to understand what the machine's doing. So. Yeah. All right. I had a couple of things. Well, last week we ended with you talking about a couple new things that you got.
Oh yeah.
We got the
Absolutely,
NAS. We
yeah.
got your handheld.
We talked about Synology last week.
Yeah, your handheld Windows machine thing. That's now
My
your
ROG Ally
yeah.
X, which we didn't
Yeah.
talk too much about that, but it was I did mention that I
No,
did.
but you run that as your Windows machine, right? You plug it to
Yeah,
a docking
it's kinda
station.
crazy. Yeah.
So it's like your gaming console.
Mhm.
I wonder.
Like, I'm not doing crazy amounts with it, but my
Yeah.
idea behind it, 'cause I primarily, because of work, when I'm at my desktop, I pretty much I'm just working. So I'm mostly working off my MacBook Pro that my company gave me. That's where I'm doing most of my work. But I was like, I do have a couple of desktop PCs that I have just a little bit dated, but I've talked about them before. They have a good amount of memory. I was probably using as like kind of test Linux servers and just doing some of the projects with. I also have like a B-Link PC. Have you seen these? Like the small little PCs that are basically like the size of like an Apple TV, like a very kind of small cube box.
Yeah.
That I use as like a media server, and that's running
Okay.
Windows, which I actually
Okay.
do really like, because it's running like Plex as a media server.
No, yeah.
And it's
I
nice.
actually have Plex running on the Synology.
That's and that's something I may get into, think about from a performance standpoint. But we could talk about that. But I use that as like a media server. So I do like as running Windows, because I could just remote into it, and just if I need to make changes to it, I can. But I got the ROG Ally X primarily because I gave my daughter my gaming PC, my heavily built out.
Yeah.
It's like 64
Yeah, 'cause you
gigabytes of
used to-
memory. It has a
you used to
3080 right
coach-
now, way more than she needs right now. But I was like,
you coach the esports team and all that.
yeah, so I had
you were
a
able to-
really
you were
good
able to
gaming
place-
PC.
Yeah.
And then as we talked about, had to kind of transition to a new living
Was
space.
that a desktop, or was that a?
It was desktop. It was Alienware.
Okay. Cool.
I was like, as we moved in, I was thinking about more for my daughter's room. I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna give her my PC. Why not? Just give her my PC. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm busy with work anyway. I don't have much time to play games. I was like, I'm just gonna give it to her. She's like super happy. It's more a computer that she'll probably need for a couple of years. But then I also realized, man, I kind of miss playing some of my games, like Civ 6, my strategy games. Like I kind of like to boot them up every now and again on my Windows PC, and I don't really have that much anymore. And I was like, I started to look around, and then I was like, saw these handhelds, like the Steam Deck. I considered that. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool, because we talked about that before, and it's basically a Linux handheld, and Steam has got, and working or spending some time on Linux last year, they've made leaps and bounds when it comes to gaming on Linux, primarily because of Steam.
Because of Steam,
and their Proton layer that they built out, and how it provides like the compatibility for Windows games. Really, really great. And so I was like, oh yeah, that does look good. It has a nice OLED screen, and I never was a big fan of like the touch pads they have on there, so I wasn't really sure about that. But then I saw like the ROG Ally X, which is kind of another option for if you want to have like a handheld to play games on, and it runs Windows. Now people have an issue with it running Windows, because you're not comfortable with that, or also can be a little bit clunky here and there, especially if you're trying to.
Well, you said when you boot it up, you don't have like that game console UI.
No,
it's
it
like
basically just boots up into Windows.
Yeah. Okay.
So a lot of people have issues with that, because when you use a Steam Deck, it is basically a handheld gaming console, right? You boot into it, you see all your games, you could navigate through them really easily. It's a really great experience. If you want purely a console experience in your hands like this, and it's PC based or not.
Yeah. But you can play PC games on it, but it gives you like that UI that you're used to, like select the game that you want to play. Can you not boot up the Windows one in like a tablet mode?
Yeah, as a more reduced UI.
Yeah, like I know when like for my Surface Pro or even the Surface Studio, if I flip it around and it knows the keyboard's not there,
Well, it does have a nice kind of pop-up keyboard that it knows, because if you don't have a keyboard,
but even I remember there's some other tablet mode that it kind of made everything big, and they're big icons.
Well, it's interesting. The display is actually 1080 display.
Okay.
So you have full 1080 display kind of on the small device. So it just looks small.
Yeah.
So as long as you get older like me, put in your reading glasses, you'll be able to see it and navigate it.
Let me find.
And you could use it if you plug in a keyboard to a mouse, and you just have the small little screen, the 7-inch screen, the 1080p. You could use it as a normal 1080p computer. It's totally fine.
You're like, let me launch my IDE here.
Yeah. Wow, this would be so small reading that text.
You typed him to do it.
Oh man. Oh, which we should get into. I've gotten back into watches too. So I've talked about that and thinking about how I can't read the text on my watches now, because I've gotten older. I was like, that's another issue we could talk about. But yeah, so going back to why I got this, it was like, okay, I like the fact it is a Windows PC. And some people have an issue with that because it's not a pure gaming console experience. But I like the fact, because what I mostly use it for now, I have it docked to my desk. And when I want to switch from my MacBook Pro to the ROG Ally X, I just take the USB-C connector, plug it into it, and all, because everything's all my keyboards, everything's wired into my dock. So I just switch it over.
Monitor too?
That one cable. Yeah, everything. That
Everything,
one
yeah.
cable powers everything. And so I plug it in, it switches it over.
That's
Everything.
what's really cool too about like what we're able to do with USB now, and the fact that it used to be like, oh, I had a docking station, and on some laptops they had the actual docking station, like thing, like a special connector.
Yeah.
Like I had a Toshiba years ago that it would click in, and there was some weird connector, and then because you couldn't, I mean, you weren't running screens off of USB back then, but now, now you just move a USB-C, connector from one computer to the other, and boom, you've got everything you need. So.
Yeah, so it actually is worked really well. And so my idea behind it, I don't have time for this right now, but I really want to do it. I do use occasionally on the weekends to play some games, and like I said, I mostly play a lot of strategy games. And it actually, for how much power it has, it does really well powering games that in 1080p. If you try to plug into a monitor that has a larger display, then it may you may have to start turning down the settings for some of the games, especially for like first person shooter games or something that has like a lot of 60 frames, 30 60 frames per second, and it's a lot of graphics that are being rendered. It may slow down a little bit, but just for normal strategy games, it's super great. And for on a larger display, so that's primarily what I use it for. But then my idea behind it is like, it would be cool if I can get back into doing a little bit of hobby game development to get Godot, or I don't know if I would use Unity again on it, but like Godot as a gaming engine, and to build a game, but then also have it, I can just unplug it and play my game directly on the device. So that is a dream. Maybe that dream will come to fruition at some point where I'll have enough time to get back to Godot, which I used to teach in my interactive design class at the school. Get back to it, start doing some hobby gaming development again, and then basically I can play my games directly on the device. And that seems like a pretty cool experience. Kind of develop on the device that you're designing for and building on top of, and do most of your development on a computer on a monitor with a keyboard and mouse, a larger display. But then I actually want to test out my game and play it and take it somewhere. Just unplug it, take my game, and I can play it. Yeah, so that is the dream, Tim. I'm hoping to live it at some point.
There was a little microcontroller that I got. One of the kids, I think I have it around here somewhere, and they're plugging into Microsoft Make Code and writing some games, and then playing it on this little handheld with the little screen. It's a cool experience to be like, hey, yeah, that's the thing I did. Yeah, that's super cool. Well, I have one other question for you. I know it's been years now since you were a teacher, or months.
It feels like years. Well, it feels like years
since you did.
Even though once the semester started, I rolled into, I heard about people teaching again. I was like, I don't miss that. I'm happy where I'm at. So I'm good. I'm happy with this transition I made.
So it's been a while since you did design, but my daughter is editing a school newspaper type thing.
That's
right.
Fun.
So for the homeschool association that we're part of. And she wants to lay out an infographic. And I was surprised by the lack of tools that I could find that are kind of made for that. But I didn't find it. I would think like what is it? D3? That's the JavaScript library. Which, I think
if you're going to code something out, D3 would be the way to go.
Right, right.
Give your daughter to do to design an infographic with.
Right, but it's like where you see infographics, and you're like, yeah, they have cool variations of pie charts.
Web infographics kind of that are interactive. Yeah, more like the program of the library like D3, which is very good at visualizing data.
And this is more of this is obviously going to be a static infographic. It's about like meet the staff. So some different questions they ask the staff, and it's like I can generate charts which don't look nice because they're charts. I can edit SVG files in a vector-based editing program. Where's the thing that like says, oh, take an SVG and tell me percentage filled? Where's the tools to make? Because that's what those infographics do. They show. It's like, oh, I want to show distribution of something. Instead of a pie chart, I want it to be a rectangle where percentages are filled to show this thing.
Or
where's that tool?
A radial dial or an arc, right?
Right.
If I have an arc, how can say I only fill up like 64% of that?
It's SVG. Yeah. Just like give me the thing to say, here's my SVG, here's 2 points of control. It's vector, so it's all math. Like, where is that tool? And I can imagine that people are building infographics by like saying, I think this is how it should look. Now let me throw this in Excel, look at the chart. And like, oh, I'm gonna make my thing have the same rough proportions, my cool version of a chart.
Interesting. And my colleague, both Josh Miller reference,
Oh, Josh Miller reference. Josh Miller. It's been a while since we had a Josh Miller
back in
reference.
the day.
Yeah.
I don't know how much he still does, teaching his design students how to design out infographics, primarily using Illustrator, maybe a little bit After Effects if you especially want to animate it. But that was I would say a full class, but that was a good majority of one of the courses he taught was basically designing infographics, informational graphics. And also Jason Zulli, my other colleague, he took that over, and so that is one or two assignments he does per semester is teaching students how to use vector-based graphic tools like Illustrator, primarily Illustrator, to design out how to lay out the information, how to design out the graphs, how to make it.
But they're still doing it
but also engaging from a visual standpoint. Yeah.
Right. But they're still doing it. I'm guessing I'm going to use air quotes by hand.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, I want a cool concept. It's going to be like a bar graph, but we're going to show it with the buildings that look like the Empire State Building or something like that.
And it's never something that I specialize in. I did some web infographic work, and like you said, using libraries like a D3 library or component libraries that basically you just set an array or dictionary, and poof, it'll pop up the graphic that you could just maybe do a little bit of a CSS editing of the graphic to how it gets rendered. But from a Illustrator or desktop perspective, I haven't done too much work for designing infographics, but there has to be plugins that exist to basically you could just plug in your data into it and then select like a preset of graphs or visualizations and then give you a little bit of customization of those. But
I don't know. The technique I got was I went to Google Sheets, made a chart, and then like it was something. There's an infographic like your next school year. What's your load look like? Like the same as before? Is it it's changed a lot, or it's a heavier load, or and we put that data in there, did a pie chart, and then in Google Sheets you can export a chart as SVG. So we just took it SVG, dropped it into Inkscape, and just extracted out the circle that has those shapes, and then superimpose that over a backpack and, used a mask. So now it looks like it's the backpack that has the different colors, but it's like, where's the tools to make that easy? Where's the thing to say, oh, this is a shape. Now make the background fill of it essentially a pie chart or like a stacked bar, to show those types of data. And I guess we must be doing all this infographic stuff pretty much by hand, I'm guessing.
It is.
Okay, so if you don't know any tools, then
like I said, it's something at the school that I did not specialize in. I saw a lot of the work that was done by the students.
Yeah,
but my coworkers, they were the ones who primarily were the instructors of those assignments. But it is an interesting field, especially it's not something also professionally I did a lot of. I don't know. For me, it also seemed kind of boring work. It wasn't very super interesting. If it was interactive, if it was online based, absolutely. I saw the sense in that. I like that. Visualizing data has always been
infographic meets dashboard concept.
Yeah, dashboards. I always loved the idea of kind of building those out and how to represent data in a very intuitive, user friendly way. And doing that today with QuickSight and other tools for learning, understanding your cloud infrastructure and the data that's been passing through systems is still something I do now. But from a desktop flat perspective or static perspective, I haven't done too much work with those tools and be able to visualize that.
Yeah, I was just curious because I searched all over for it, found like the standard sites like Canva and like Pictus something and they have these templates and you click on them and it's like they're just text. Like you just made like blocks of text in kind of a long format, a tall format, because I don't know why people like that for infographics, because they feel like you're going to load it in your browser and just scroll through it or something. I don't know. But we put text there and I'm like, where's the idea of the info? Where's how does data get into this? And none of them had any any way to do that. So
this sounds like another great idea for a startup.
There you go.
And a startup, and there's probably been many startups that have tried this, and many that have failed.
So we'll be the one. This time,
we're definitely not doing this one, Tim. No,
this time it'll succeed.
I put a big kibosh on this idea.
So here's though. But before you start a startup, what is it that you need? What's the first thing that you need?
A name, Tim.
You need a domain name, right? So what is the infographic?
And eventually, when we're hosted by GoDaddy, this would roll into a great commercial.
Not a sponsor, but you can go. Route 53, Namecheap, all the fun domain registrars. Hey, Two Cows. Do you remember Two Cows?
Two Cows, absolutely.
Open
Yeah.
SRS
Back
back in the day. They're still around, I think. Pretty sure they're still around. I think we were company I worked for. The hosting company I worked for was an Open SRS reseller, and I don't know. I'm not sure what the Two Cows was, but their logo. They were,
I remember that being
Two
a web
cows.
host reseller or web domain
Yes.
reseller. Oh man, those were the days, man.
You make that cut on every $10 domain, man.
You could buy like a shared hosting account for $5 and like sell it to a client for $50 and like you host like 20 clients on it. That was the days of making money, Tim.
Yeah. So we got 45 seconds ish left. What is the domain name for this?
For
this info, like whatever this tool is to help you make infographics. What would the domain be?
the Lidl infos.
It can't be a name. No, it just
Little infos.
Little info. A little. Oh, actually, that's not bad.
Little
a little
info. A little info.
Okay. FO. There's not an FO subdomain. Is there like the IN
You
dot
could,
FO?
yeah.
Like,
This
is there a dot FO?
INFO? Yes, there is.
Is there?
There is, Tim.
Oh no, there's info, but there's not. Okay, yeah, that's right. It could be just little dot info. Look at that. Try it now.
Little dot info. I think that probably is. That's probably taken.
Pretty sure that's taken. Alrighty, I've got 4 minutes before a meeting, so.
All right, well, take care. Yeah, offline too. Actually, we probably should talk about too. You bring up the homeschooling occasional episodes. That's kind of what I'm doing with my daughter now too. So it's kind of.
Oh, really?
Well, she's in the PA Leadership Charter Art School.
Oh, okay.
Basically, is like a homeschooling setup. So, but they actually are doing a pretty good job. I was skeptical about it. We could talk about why we made that transition, but later. But in fact, they've actually done a pretty good job. Like their online programs that have. So I'm kind of curious, how does your kids use like another kind of like another online organization that you provide a lot of the materials through, but then you support them with them?
We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
Show topic for next week. All right. Back to school. It'll be like October. We'll be saying back to school. Everybody's gonna be like,